evening, beloveds. For those of you all that do not know me, my name is DeShay Jackson, and I serve as the Minister of Music here at First Christian Church, Granbury. I am a third-year Master of Divinity student with an emphasis toward gender and sexual justice and Black church studies. I have a bachelor's in music education from Culver Stockton College in Canton, Missouri, and I am a fourth-generation so much to a point of movements that are like, let's get back to the early church. And I am all for getting to the early church in certain ways. In fact, the early church practiced something of koinonia, if even before the church was formed. Koinonia being a community, it's an identity within itself. I would love to get back to that type of church.
Okay.
But beloved, it's kind of like forgiveness. Forgiveness implies the fact that we know the past won't change. And in the same way, the idea of wanting to go back to these movements are a bit of a failed attempt. Instead, we need to move on from that and realize that the past isn't quite going to happen. But I don't think the past should be left completely bare. See, in this lovely, rich story of the formation of the church, or the formation of Jesus' followers after Jesus' death, shows a different side of the created beings of the divine. And also I'll let you know that whenever I mention God, it might be the name, the divine one. I vary it. But in this, we learn about the Ethiopian eunuch. And some might be saying, well, DeShay, what's a eunuch? I learned about a eunuch through musical form before I ever learned what a eunuch was biblically. And so a eunuch, when we talk about music in the classical era, in the, actually before then, Renaissance era and all this stuff, young boys who were boy sopranos who had this pure tone in their voice, the parents wanted to keep that clarity because that was another way of making income. A child that could sing was working. And so to keep that pure tone, one must interact before puberty takes place, because once that happens, the dissension of the testicles also creates a dissension in the voice. And once you descend on the voice or the vocal cords, you can't get back up to that perfect sweet tone. But then these young boys are taken and they are castrated. And they are able to keep singing throughout their life, but they will never know the effects of puberty. They will never know about having a high voice. Having a low voice, there we go. They will never understand what it means to go through puberty. That is what I learned musically about eunuchs, but that doesn't necessarily help out fully. See, the Bible talks about eunuchs even before we start getting into the Newer Testament. If anything, our Hebrew Bible or our Old Testament or Older Testament speaks about eunuchs in different forms, but most prominently, I want to say, is in the book of Esther. That is, the eunuchs were the ones who guarded the queen's chambers, because eunuchs were about two different people. They were either born that way, or they were man-made that way. Which would be Jesus' answer in Matthew. And so what we have to discuss with this idea of man-made and natural, natural is a word we constantly argue when discussing orientation. What you have to understand is that eunuch in that natural form, this born this way, speaks to orientation. And specific orientation, it actually speaks more to a sexual orientation. See, eunuchs were hired or made either out of battle because they wanted to keep the strongest people, but they did not want them to be sleeping with the women that were there. Eunuchs were in charge of keeping the queen's chamber safe. They held a high role in the court, all because of the fact that they were either, one, not attracted to women, that natural, or the man-made, which not so fun entirely, because that's not by choice. But this natural, this man-made one, even Jesus acknowledges that this is a type of person in his society that wouldn't have been married. And the question even becomes, like, Jesus, what do we do if we got to get a divorce? And Jesus isn't the most favorable. If you want to go into that, I will find a way to put in notes the passage in Matthew. But simply, if you can't be, it's like, if you got to be married, okay, don't divorce. And also, there are people that are specifically not made to marry in this society. So all of that information to tell you about eunuchs is that they were what we call our modern day gay people, queer people, people that probably would have aligned with the lesbian, gay, transsexual, or trans, bisexual, queer, questioning, asexual, intersex, two-spirited persons that make up that rainbow, or what everyone likes to jokingly call the alphabet soup. The Ethiopian eunuch was a queer person, y'all. So take that information and let's apply it with Philip in there now. See, Philip worked with Peter in this mission of spreading the gospel. And in the moment of spreading the gospel, the Spirit, and I'm going to believe the Holy Spirit, as she flits and floats and speaks to us in different ways, goes into his ear and says, hey, There's somebody that might need your help. Like, I want you to go meet him. And Philip in his obedience just goes and finds the Ethiopian eunuch. It's also a little important to note the area that this eunuch comes from, because I want to say that this eunuch was black. Now, of course, we don't use modern terms on antiquity, but if you want to view it like I view it, the Ethiopian eunuch was a queer black person. And so Philip goes to help this queer black person, because Philip notices that they have a scroll of Isaiah, and that is a part of Philip's tradition, but it doesn't seem that the eunuch knows what they're reading. And like some, when you have authority, the first thing is to flaunt your knowledge and be like, see, you're doing this wrong. I want you to, see, if you're going to pick up this scroll, then I want you to know how, I want you to do it right. But that's not the energy Philip comes with, and I am ever so grateful. Because Philip takes a stance of both intentionality, but also genuineness. The intrigue of, like, do you know what you're reading? It's not a matter of, do you know what you're reading? Or really the inflection of, do you really know how to read that? Instead, it's, do you know what you're reading? And it's like, how? And the eunuch in great fashion just says, well, how am I supposed to if no one will teach me? Because what the story does not tell you is that in biblical context, eunuchs weren't necessarily allowed in the temple. And so, once again, bring your modernness to it. It's like saying black queer people couldn't go to church because of the status of being queer. I think we might have heard that one, usually in the queer part, but black and queer have been both. So why not combine them? And Philip takes that moment to read the story. And not only is this beautiful, beautiful collaboration of biblical understanding with this biblical, oh gosh, I don't even know what to call it, just this imagination, this inquisitive nature melds together, because the Ethiopian eunuch is so compelled by the message that anything, and at this point, a thing of water, is an instant sign to be a part of a community that wants him. A community that calls people to go out to him, to explain, and then, rightfully so, invites in. See, the Ethiopian eunuch's excitement for being baptized is such a wholesome and loving experience that, my gosh, I don't think my straight friends could ever get, or even my cisgendered heterosexual friends. And I'll go through terms. I promise I won't leave you. There is absolutely nothing in that passage that separates the eunuch from the love of God. And in that very moment, to join in was no question, was no, well, I want you to come and do this. There was no badgering. There was not a balance, an abuse of power. It was simply, let's read together. And if you want to join us, you are more than welcome. And the story of the Ethiopian eunuch gives hope to my identity. See, I have been at this church now, it will be 8 months come 2 days. That'll be my first Sunday was almost 8 months ago. And when I first started here, I played in safety. I grew up in a town that's similar to Granbury. It's a similar hybrid of New London and Hannibal, Missouri, and a little bit of Quincy, Illinois. That really becomes Granbury. And I grew up in those spaces. I grew up in what we call a heteronormative society, meaning that straight people got to decide what was normal and what could be put on television, and decided what was holy and what was harmful, what was pure and what was dirty. And I lived in that society. I even grew up in purity culture, which is very much heteronormative. I had all of that. So when I applied here, my first thought was, I've been here before. do I want to go back? Like, don't get me wrong, my home church, Second Christian Church in New London, Missouri, where I was born, raised, whatever, and cutting my teeth and yelling amen. That's not my issue. That church raised me and loves on me through my ordination and all. But it was another church that I had attended. And I won't give the name, but a lot of my faith foundation was with this church. And it was a church that had similar energy to what we have. Very inviting, very loving, great music, great fellowship. And then something happened. In July of 2014, I went to Twin Lakes, Michigan to work at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp. It's a camp of 1,500 kids and 200 staff. It's a big place. And this was the first time that I had ever spent out of state without anybody I knew. I drove the 8 hours by myself, and I did the entire 2.5-month experience without anybody from my comfort, from my home. And it was during this time that I started to notice something. I was separated from my girlfriend at the time. We'd still been in conversation and all this, and I kept up with this, but there was something weird that kept happening. And my brain, for some odd reason, like my eyes kept being attracted to this one dancer that was right across the camp. We have different villages, so it's a large place. But it was a dancer that I shared some table duty with, that we watched each other's kids. But I couldn't understand why I was, one, so comfortable, but also attracted. And I'm like, what? Maybe this is just because I really just miss my girlfriend and all. I'm like, so now I'm just seeing like walks of life. And it's like, that wasn't it. And I was during a staff break a couple of days that I went with a couple of friends to the Upper Peninsula and this one place that we call a tridge. It is a three joining bridge. And in that bridge, another friend of mine, we looked at each other and we came out to each other. And we came out as bisexual that day. It was the most freeing experience that I had ever felt. It was so freeing because nobody I knew. Anybody that I knew did not know. There we go. And all the people that I could say it around were open and more than affirming. That it's just like, oh, I kind of thought you were. And yet it was all clear in that moment. Now the hard part was going back home, and I was already doing the theology to support it, but I was doing the theology to support my friends that were queer, not me. And it became a long process of coming out, of studying theology. Even telling my girlfriend at the time was like a whole conversation that needed to happen. But that part of my identity, when it was opened so many doors to some of the things I do now in my own theology. It opened up to a point where I could find what I need and no longer have to fear grabbing a book that talks about blessed by spirit and is the spiritual lives of different bisexual individuals and read into the faith of it. It was enough for me to be able to go into seminary and deal with all of the pains that we call the clobber passages that queer folk get every time. Like, we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, and everyone wants to think that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is homosexuality, when it's not. It is indeed gang rape, inhospitality, and just straight up, just awful. It was nothing but death dealing. When we talk about Leviticus 18:22, for man shall not lie with man, for it is considered an abomination or a sin. Y'all, some of these passages come and talk to me because I don't have the bandwidth or even the time tonight to discuss all 6 of the clobber passages. But it has taken me 4 years at least to build up the language that keeps me safe. It is no longer I get into fears for having conversations about sexuality and Christianity, because yes, you can be a queer person and a Christian and be a queer Christian.
Amen.
Those are not mutually exclusive, because God has made us in God's image and God calls us good.
Amen.
And out of those things Jesus recognizes those that were made good in different forms. And Jesus does not bastardize them. Jesus even mentions that these honorable folks. And these are the people that get to live into their lives knowing of a challenge, which hurts. It really does, that I get to live with a challenge, and at the same time, it gives me a different lens that others don't have. And speaking of other lenses that others don't have, see all of this ability to build up my own queer identity, to understand what it means to be me and what it means to be theologically me in the context of God, my orientation, and my ministry. I believe that God or the Divine One showed me that I wasn't done, I'm not done. And that another identity popped up. And I swear to you all, I fought this one for over a year, probably longer, but it's been in my conscience for over a year to sit and study and read and fellowship. And one day, with a friend of mine, two friends of mine who are queer, I looked and I said, I don't think I can identify as cisgender. And some of you might be asking, DeShay, why are you using these fancy terms? Cisgendered or cis. Cis is the Latin to mean same, so same-gendered. I don't like the term cisgendered in the sense that gender and sexuality, or gender and sex, are two separate things. One of them is biological, that being sex. Gender itself is socially constructed. It is, what does that mean? It means that certain people were to fulfill certain obligations or certain roles in society, and we've deemed that the bodies that look like this should serve this purpose. So one of the easiest ones to go off of is the 1950s, like a Stedford housewife who takes care of her home, is not married to her home, but is still a housewife, prepares her martini for her working husband, and continues to do work while he comes home. The gender roles of that are that women are to watch the household and that men are to then go out and bring home the dough. That's gender roles. Those are not biological. Those are stuff that our society created because it felt that that was going to bring about organization or order. Obviously, that doesn't work now. And if you told any woman that she could not get a job, that is probably a dangerous thing for you to be blasting off at, and I don't recommend it at all. So, needless to say, going into this, I looked at them and I said, I think I identify as non-binary. Which for them, it's like, oh, makes sense. Like, because one of them is trans and the other one is non-binary. What does non-binary mean, DeShay? Oh, I'm so glad you all in internet land have asked. But when one identifies as non-binary, first of all, anybody that identifies it will define it in their own way. So like when I define bisexuality, people like to think bi as a binary, and that's not what I'm going for. Bi as a prefix for same and different. So moving past that, the non-binary is that I don't identify with the gender of man nor woman. I live in this space that kind of floats the way it wants to. And sometimes that means that I might have a little more of an androgynous style. And that's like painting my nails. My nails aren't painted today though, odd enough. Wearing earrings. Things that would make a lot of people question my masculinity or my manhood. That's not something I could ascribe to and could not for the longest time understand. I grew up without my dad, and a lot of people would say, well, that's the reason why, and that's not it at all. Because if that was the case, my cousin up the street would also have identified as non-binary, and some of the other children I went to school with would have. But that's not the case. So when you live into non-binary, you think, well, then what does this have to do biblically, DeShay? Because at this point, I don't know what you want me to learn. And I take my guidance of being non-binary from the very source themselves. The person that we call God, the one that we say whom all blessings flow from, My identity comes from God, and it's not impossible, because if we believe that we are created in the image of God, that means that we connect with the spiritual DNA of God, and that means then the DNA of God is within us. And so those things that we hold are of God. And I fully believe that our identity, our orientation is holy. It is of God. Whether you identify as a man or a woman, non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, does not matter, because your God has the ability to change into all of those forms for you. Your God has the ability to move in different ways, because everybody's not the same. If you think God stays static in a way that presents God in only one way, that's dangerous thinking, in my opinion. When we allow God to be as big and as vast and as expansive and as descriptive as we make God, humanity, and it's, I don't know, there's over 7 billion of us on the planet or something. There's a large number of us. Why are we not allowed that same beauty of difference, of the same beauty of creation, when our God is all of these things? What I've come to find is that being queer in the church has been hard. It's hard because the people that you thought loved you or watched you grow sometimes turn their backs on you. Sometimes they say hurtful things to you. Sometimes they want to use science to disprove your lived experience. And while facts matter, and I could even agree with Ben Shapiro's comment of was it facts don't care about your feelings? I fully believe that. But my lived experience is not something that you can just sit and read black and white. I myself am a complex, like all of us, individual. My life does not need you to throw scripture passages at it to try to make me stumble. My life isn't an experiment for you to poke in and out of. My life is not, I was going to say a crystal stair, but my life in ministry is not an anomaly, or it shouldn't be an anomaly. See, queer people are just as wholesome as our straight counterparts. We are just as fearfully and wonderfully made as all of creation. And if we fully believe, at least within the disciples, this priesthood of all believers, this whole idea where we don't are worried about apostolic succession or who can talk to God, we've empowered people to talk to God. We empower people to do ministry. That empowering to do ministry doesn't have a caveat. It doesn't have a disclaimer. It doesn't have on there that when you're reaching all nations or whatever, preaching and teaching or anything, it doesn't say, but stay away from these people. Or it doesn't say, when you preach to these people, let them know that they can be a part of it, but like, they're just a number. Like, they're giving us like some more support, but they're like, don't let them teach our kids. Don't let them around our kids. Don't let them teach our Sunday school classes. Don't let them preach. You can let them do music. That's okay. Music's okay. Don't let them do anything else. It's not what our Great Commission, that's not what the priesthood of all believers, that is not what any of that says. And I fully believe, living into the beauty that God has bestowed into my life with all challenges, because being queer is one thing, being black and queer would take me another 20 minutes to talk about. But they're experiences I'm willing to share. And I want you to know that there's pain with it too. It's not easy. But if we can just take a note from Philip talking to the Ethiopian eunuch, if we could just take a page from that and live into seeing each other as another and not the other, and I'm giving credit to Dr. Oluwatomisin Oradane for this, removing that barrier of seeing an other makes it a whole lot easier to have people join a community. When I can see you and I see you as another person and not the other, there are no flags that pop up. There's nothing in me that gets defensive. If anything, I see you as human. I see you how you are. And that is how I interact with you. Not any preconceived notions, not any stereotypes, not from what my cousin Candy does. I see you for you. I see you for whatever character you present. And I see that this is something you want to do. If you want more queer people in your church, maybe we should take a note from Philip, who doesn't instantly go to queer people and say, "Why are you queer? Why are you, you know in Texas they say, there's steers and queers and all that," or simply is like, "Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you are? You sure that's not a phase?" Or, "Well, I'm not so sure what God said, because, in the Bible it does." Philip had all the material to do those things. And yet, Philip didn't. May we too be like Philip, who followed the Spirit's call to go out and meet someone for who they are, where they are at that moment. And not to change, but to understand. Love y'all. Amen.
I give you a hug. We're not doing that right now.
It's good.
Shay, thank you. Thank you. Are we okay?
I think we're good. I may have messed up on the audio right at the beginning. So tell us the verses that you read right up front.
So that was from the book of Acts, chapter 8, verse 26 through 40. And I read from the New Revised Standard Version. That is what I have to read almost all the time. My second would either be the egalitarian, what is the thing called? What is the egalitarian Bible called? Oh, I can't think of it right now. Either the Common English Bible. It bothers me that I can't think of the name of it. It's on my shelf. Anyway.
We good?
We're good.
So I've got a couple questions. First, can I offer a comment? Can I just say something? I want to thank you. Shay, you are a beautiful human being, and we love you. And you, as a black person, have come to a 98% white church in a 90% white town, and that has taken courage, probably more than anybody that looks like me will ever know, right? I don't know what the percentage is when it comes to LGBTIQ plus are. I suspect that there are more people probably in this community than most people realize who identify in those ways.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
But it is some of those identities, a lot of people in communities like this probably really struggle with, don't understand, right? Yeah. And once again, here you are, okay? And then tonight, you have, and by the way, I want to acknowledge this too. This is something we talked about today. You started here in February, right? Yeah. Right at the end of February.
Beginning of February.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then March 11th, we closed our sanctuary, and unfortunately, one of the things that has meant, and this is something that brings me sadness, is that our people haven't yet really had the chance to get to know you like this, right, face to face, and just experience your presence and you theirs, right?
Yeah.
And that saddens me. And so, into all of that, into that milieu, you have stepped up here onto this chancel today, in front of this cross, and laid yourself bare, and been honest and authentic and genuine about who you are, about who God created you to be. And again, that has taken tremendous courage, and we thank you for that. And I just want to affirm that. Again, levels of courage that many people have never had to struggle with in their lives. And so I thank you for that. I thank you for your heart, for the joy that you have brought this congregation already, for the love that you have for us, for the depth of spirit and the faith that you have, and your willingness to share that with us, and the ways that you have led us to experience Jesus Christ more deeply through all of that. So I just want to thank you first before we discuss further. Okay. First question then. Well, I'll give you the softball first.
Oh,
all right.
those things are thick.
Softballs are actually hard.
Exactly.
Right? Unless you play Chicago-style softball, if you've ever played that, they use this big, enormous ball that really is a lot softer, and you don't have to wear a glove. You can just catch them. It's really fun.
I prefer that.
Anyway, Chicago. Okay, when you and this actually has nothing to do with identity. Well, it doesn't have to do with racial identity or gender identity, but there's still an identity piece here. Okay, when you joined this team, followed a person whose title was choir director. Okay, and he was wonderful. We love him, and he did much to bless us and facilitate beautiful worship here. You were intentional about your hope to be called minister of music. Okay? A different kind of identity, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Talk to us about that. Why was that important to you? And what does it mean to be a minister of music? Maybe that's not a softball. I don't know. It's an important question, but I wanted to ask you.
It's soft enough that I can at least swing at.
Okay.
I was like, the difficulty is that minister of music is also just a title.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it holds the same weight as being, I don't know, a sandwich artist or a general manager. I was a sandwich artist. Like, well, it's a title. It's like, you're debating art, but like, is a sandwich artist?
Fair enough.
Exactly. Or like, unless they're crafting something. No, we're just putting sandwiches together through all of like the stuff on there. So minister of music can be just a simple title of like, all I do is provide music for the church, in a leadership capacity. I wanted the title of minister of music because, for one, I'm on the ordination. In sermon and ordination with the Mid-America region of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And so, I've had to write multiple times, one, what does it mean to be a minister or a minister of, authorized ministry, anything else? And I lay into the fact that a minister is not just someone who does this theology or does this music. A minister shepherds. A minister puts their body available to be like, this stuff is hard, this stuff is messy sometimes. Like, we are meant to be people that are just like, yes, you can come into us, our boundaries are up here, but come into us, talk to this stuff. Like, ministers aren't just those that preach, aren't those that just do missions, or that are not just youth ministers or work with youth. Like, music ministry ends up becoming more performative. And that is what I try to combat, is that we are probably the easiest ministry that looks like a performance.
Mm-hmm.
Because people clap, there's rehearsal, of course, for either group, but, there was rehearsal involved, there's a spectacle of it, to a degree. And we can't fight that, we have to live into it. But by saying that I'm a music minister and not a choir director, does not just limit me to music. Then, if anything, it does kind of force me to discuss how we do music, how we do ministry through music and avenues of that. But it's specifically it's the centering on ministry. And so I think minister is a lot more relational than director. So, yeah.
I appreciate that, and I've seen that in you, and I've seen that through you in your time here. Even though we have been limited in terms of human interaction, you have ministered to people through music, but you have also ministered with people outside of music experience. You have provided pastoral care, theological conversation, all these kinds of things. So I would affirm that too. I've certainly seen you embody that.
I love being here because this has been the place to do that. Honestly, it's not that I didn't in my last parish. It's just people are just coming to my office more or talk to me.
Yeah,
I like that. I like this.
That's a good segue, actually.
Okay.
Next question. So, okay. There may be, maybe not, but I suspect that there may be some people watching this, whether live or in a few days recorded, for whom some of what you said will be challenging.
Yes.
Okay. Challenge is healthy. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
And my question for you is, for those persons, what do you hope for? What do you hope for in terms of how they receive and process and move forward in that challenge?
Let me make this statement and then allow me to think. I love you and you all. Hold that. My hope is always to give light to perspectives that have been historically underrepresented and oppressed, or the term I like to use is socially excluded communities that the church has both intentionally and unintentionally forgotten. The hope is that this brings an awareness to people that there are more than one ways to identify and still be in line with God. And in fact, I don't even think there's necessarily a gender identity that is outside of God. What I want people to take in is patience. I say patience because getting new information is hard. Getting new information that you may not trust or goes against what you've been taught for years is really hard to put in conversation sometimes. And what we would call a cognitive dissonance might occur. And when you get into cognitive dissonance, which I had at 19 years old, and it did send me into a bit of depression. Well, I mean, I be candid, I do have depression. But it triggered a depressive episode that just went throughout the rest of the evening. And I want you, and my hope is that you do not run away from that. It is in those moments of discomfort and cloudiness that we then begin to realize that we don't always see everything.
And what are some practical steps that you would hope that people might take in those situations? What are some things they can do to continue to, process that, to live into that, to wrestle with that?
I want to say that the people that call themselves partners, family, friends of this church, I am putting myself out here right now. There will be boundaries with this. I'm putting myself out right now to say that if you have questions, genuine questions that are not meant to turn into debates or are not meant to trap me, good luck, but are not meant to trap me, email me. Let's talk. And I mean the sense of email me and let's set up something for discussion, whether it's a Zoom, whether it is a socially distanced lunch, let's talk to where you can hear my tone and I can hear yours. Because that's the one thing about email and text is tone gets lost. Come to me. I want you to do that. Second, Don't overload yourself. The frustration with new information is that sometimes we want to hear so much to either, one, create an argument against, or we take in so much information because it's so new and we become overloaded. Little bits at a time. And the other thing is, think about, and I think this one is a moment of discernment. Think heavily about who you listen to preach, who you read, and I mean that in any genre, whether that be fiction, nonfiction, all of that. Look at your forms of literature, look at your television shows, look at aspects of your life, and begin to ask yourself, or even ask yourself, where do I see a lot of commonalities? And then where do I not see perspectives that would make a difference? So if you watch a lot of, I could probably find an interesting one. It used to be that a lot of Nickelodeon television shows had a lot of white characters, and like multiple ones. But then you got Cousin Skeeter was one for Nickelodeon that had a couple seasons. You had Taia, which was for our Latinx, our Latinx siblings. And then you had there's some of these, and it's like, and they make people tokens. But you don't see any more characters that look like them, or you don't even see any more shows that allow that. And then you have to ask, does the television network I watch produce a lot of content that looks more like the majority? And the majority is sometimes we are the majority, sometimes we're not. If you're watching a lot of television shows that white people are your main characters, and that's like if you watch Gunsmoke, Andy Griffin, the Waltons. I'm really about to go on all of them that my mother watches. All of those on like a TV Land or whatever it was. Those, like, start to think about those, and don't be harsh on yourself. But come to an understanding that what would my life look like with a little bit of difference? And also, I want you to hold the fact that we don't have to initially agree. What I would like to initially agree on is that we are all children of God and we are all created by God. And I fully believe that everybody listening to this can agree to that. Amen. I don't think there's any theological issue for that.
Well, I mean,
I know there's a lot that we really could. You could really even argue out of the 12 tribes of like, is anybody really? But in my view, yes.
I appreciate that. So if people want to dialogue with you, honestly, then they can reach out.
Yeah.
And all of us on this ministerial staff are available for conversation when it comes to any of these issues. I would love it, of course, if people who are struggling would
reach out.
Would reach out to you and share conversation with you, so that you can see each other's humanity, as you have those conversations. I'm also thinking about the humbling power of prayer. And if there's one thing that I really can't tolerate here, I don't like to use that language because it's not about what I can and can't tolerate, okay? But if there's something I can't tolerate, it's meanness. And we're just not going to do that. We're just not going to do that, all right? And I think oftentimes, especially in this very uncertain, messy, politicized world that we're living in, especially given the power of social media and how much influence that has, it is often the case that when we engage in what we think are conversations, we do so with the intention of winning and imposing our positions on others. And so I would also just encourage all of us in general, especially during this season, to be in prayer and to be asking God. This is one of our core values of this congregation: humility. That asking that God would humble us during this time, so that we might be open to learning and growing and listening to one another and growing as community rather than being focused on imposing what we think on everybody else. So I would maybe add that to the list, right, of things that we could be doing during this time as we wrestle with these things. Okay, next question. Okay. The church, universal.
Okay, I was like this or okay.
Church universal has a maybe not the best record when it comes to
period. I'm sorry.
That concludes our episode. The church doesn't have the best record, and in particular, the church doesn't have the best record when it comes to affirming the beauty of black people.
Yes.
Okay. The church has also done much to harm queer people.
Yeah.
But here you are. Why?
I love this question because it is honestly something I asked myself multiple times. And I don't think it's even I don't even think it's a semester of seminary if I don't question why on earth I'm doing this. I have to acknowledge what you said before, that historically the church has been an oppressive force contrary to the message it was supposed to be preaching. There's reasons we have black churches, and some would say, I don't know why we have to have black churches and white churches and Asian churches and Hispanic churches. I think we should all be one. I fully believe in unity. I really do. Unity does not strip the identity of individuals. And in that same note, the reason we have a lot of those is because of racism, sexism, racism, forms of oppression. The black church could not exist in the format that the white church, or I'm not going to say the white church, but white leaders were forcing upon them. If you want to think about like the first notion of church to a American context of blackness, or American context of black people, because this is still debatable on identity and terms, the first people that looked like me, their form of church was after being on the plantation, and then either having a white man come and saying that slaves obey your masters and all this, and a slave cannot have two masters and blah, blah, blah. Like, in reinforced information. And so we had to create things that were both invisible. The invisible church was meeting at hush harbors, whatever. And then it became a physical space, because then it also became our place of safety, our place of community, our place of education. Because we live in a country that has a history, especially with let's just say Jim Crow era, Black Coats era, segregation, and even into desegregation and like the writing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Those things did not, the Civil Rights Act did not make black people safe still. Like, there just was law to it. There's more laws to it. You still had sundown towns. So you can't be caught black in these places after sundown. There are places you couldn't eat still. The black church itself became the haven for black folks that couldn't have that. Now, going all the way back into that, the flip side of that is that whiteness, and this is not me saying white people are bad. This is not me saying white people as in you, whatever, or all of you out there. I am saying whiteness as an entity, and I want to be very clear on this. Whiteness has been a chaotic structure since the colonization of this country from indigenous people. Therefore, the powers of whiteness have infiltrated this country for years. And what that means is whiteness is oppressive. It has taken the lives of indigenous people, given smallpox blankets, has kicked people out, has then taken enslaved persons, whether they were, that's a whole other thing, but anyway, taken enslaved persons, and for decades, centuries, used this as an economic resource and viewed economically but not as a human. All of these factors and all of these teachings carry into these spaces. So the black church is not free from whiteness, even though it's got the name, the black church, even though it's, and that's not a monolith too. Every black church is different. I want to say that now. A Church of God in Christ pastor, or growing up like Reverend Brandon Wright, compared to me as a disciple of Christ, fourth generation black disciple, we have some similarities, but our upbringings would not have been the same. We could have understood each other. They're not the same. The point is that things like patriarchy, so men staying in charge of things, women not being able to preach messages that decide to shame women or for what they wear, that's patriarchy. We have sex, it's also sexism as well. Colorism is the other layer of racism that people of color participate in. Someone that is lighter skinned than me, or as terms yelled as high yellow, is going to get treated better than I do, and that's actually a thing. And so with colorism, we kind of treat it as that ends up being the standard. That ends up becoming our whiteness. Is this level of being lighter skinned, brown paper bag test, all these things. We perpetuate those. And so in the same way that the whiteness has also been bad for queer people, the whiteness has affected black churches in producing homophobia, queerphobia, biphobia, all the phobias around sexual orientation. So those things are perpetuated. So being in the black church is like, it's not a step away of being like safe or anything else, of identifying with trauma. It's like, no, these forms come back. So now then, why am I in this? That's really was your question. There was a lot of backs, I'm sorry. Because I fully believe into what the United Church of Christ has as one of their living mottos. God is still speaking. And when God is still speaking, humans have no authority. When God is in the building, there is not a hierarchy, but a community. When God is made center, all that separates us becomes null, and we become into the identity of God. That's also tricky to say, because just because they become null does not mean that they are not important, and don't allow them to become then null in our conversations. They have to be discussed. I stay in the church because God has gifted me with a voice that keeps speaking still. Even when it doesn't need to sometimes, it is still speaking. It is still speaking. I call myself privileged because I work with a ministerial staff that knew about me and still was like, we want you to come do some stuff. Like, see if, please, let's get the church on board with this. I've had support from the get-go. And I've learned that this message or these identities are not meant to be hidden, and that God has placed people in my life that have allowed those platforms to be allowed. And I think that at the early ages, I haven't stopped going to church. I've been in church since I was 18 months, and I've had a job since I was 12. God has yet to fail me in the sense of church. And even when I've moved past the scare tactics, even when I move past the pain of certain things, God still reminds me that there is goodness in the church. There is goodness in the people that are trying to build community. And that's why I cannot run away. My mom taught me that can never do anything in our house. So no. It's like, I refuse.
Do we have anything from...
No questions, but some comments.
Oh.
Cheryl Wooten says, thank you for sharing your story. I can't wait to get to know you.
Oh.
Brian Rossetti says, thank you, DeShay. That was an important moment for the church. And then later, I'm not sure exactly what you said, but he gave you an amen.
Yay.
Brenda Jeter says, well said, and we love you.
Aw.
John Pelham says, thank you, DeShay. That took a lot, and we love you for sharing it. Keep up your good work. And over Linda Wiley says, thank you, DeShay, and she sends you hugs.
There is something, is there any more?
That's all.
There is something I do want to state, because did you have more questions? Because I can ask it at the end, actually, or say it at the end.
I got one more thing to say.
Okay.
I'm aware, though, that you didn't talk about pronouns.
That
You
was
want to?
that was
Okay.
it. Yeah.
All right. Good.
Yeah. So, hi. In this current age, the past couple of years, you might have heard the phrase, "What are your preferred pronouns?" Or really specifically, just what are your pronouns? And so, let me give you a brief English lesson to go into pronouns. Remember that pronouns replace the name of a proper noun or a main noun. So, she, her, his, they, them. All of those are used as pronouns in place of the noun or proper noun. So, for instance, Justin. Justin's pronouns are, since he identifies as a man, are he, him. So if I didn't want to use his name, like I've just done now, I would put in place that pronoun. So, Justin loves potatoes. He goes everywhere over the DFW for the best purple potatoes. And when he gets them, it is phenomenal. He makes the best mashed potato salad. Oh my goodness, I've been craving it actually. Mashed potato salad.
Like, what are we talking about here?
Sorry, I really do want mashed potato salad.
Pronouns? We talking about we hungry?
No, I was like,
I'm dinner.
Thank you for reminding me of the pizza. Yes! And so then you might be asking, well, so, DeShay, what are your pronouns? My pronouns are they, them. What does that mean? Oh my goodness, it's one of the easiest things to do actually. So, I want you to think about you're introducing a new friend to a friend that you've had for a while. So, let's say for instance, so Heath is over here. So, Heath, our lovely technology director and all of the goodness. If I wanted to talk about Heath to Justin, and I didn't want to use he or anything else, I could say, oh my goodness, yeah, that's Heath over there. No, they really like to go horseback riding. They're really good about farm work. My gosh, when I went out to see them, they just had the most beautiful goats and this beautiful, what is that thing called? Great Pyrenees. I'm like, and they take such a good care of. Like, they take such good care of them. Well, they take such good care of the animals. I have completely talked to you about Heath and used they, them pronouns the entire time without having to say he or she. Here's what I'm going to tell you then, because this is new information to you. You've kind of known, I say kind of, you've known me and not known me for 8 months. You only knew me out a month out of that, and even then I wasn't identifying as just they, them. So you're bound to slip up. And accidents happen because I think we're human. So what I want you to understand is, it's going to take time. It's not easy, and mistakes will happen. Do not get defensive, though. I want you to treat it like you treat someone's name. When I talked to Justin earlier, I said, if you told me your name is Justin and I introduced you to Heath as Ryan, and I said, this is Ryan Jeter, everyone, Justin's not going to go by Ryan, unless, of course, he's like, I don't really feel like dealing with this. But Ryan's going to be like, well, my name is Justin. And I would be like, oh, yeah, my bad. And move on from it. And I know your name is Justin. And I might get it wrong again, which would be bad on myself. But I would expect you to say, it's Justin. And the same way, with this, if you say he to me, I might casually just say they. And it might just seem like I'm just kind of lightly speaking. I'm not going to bark at you. I'm not going to say they. They. For the love of God, Justin, they.
I'm Ryan.
Oh, crud. Oh, my gosh.
As long as you don't say Peter Jeter.
No, I don't like that. But if you take it into that, I fully believe that it's a lot easier to accept the correction. And I have people that have told me, like, their form of trying, and I believe it is fully trying. Like, I am called sibling. Like, we use a lot of brother-sister language in the church, and I am not a fan of it because I'm non-binary, And also, Paul gives us a lot of language that is blanketed. Saints, beloveds. Now, we do sometimes get the brothers, mostly like in the older translations, it's brothers. But there are so many ways to address communities that we find within our own text that I fully believe we should start exploring. And so it's also succinct. Instead of saying, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you could say, hey, beloveds, hey, siblings, or one of my favorites from Reverend Dr. Katie Hayes, hey, church.
Amen. I like that. Can I add one thing?
You can.
For those of you, so I love words and grammar, and the hardest thing for me initially with these pronouns was the grammatical, what I perceived as the grammatical incorrectness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Forget it. Okay? Allowing DeShay to be who DeShay is more important than grammatical correctness.
I'll also say in grammatical correctness, it has also been reaffirmed that they works as both a singular pronoun and a collective pronoun.
There you go.
Or a plural, I think is the correct term, plural pronoun.
And in Texas, it's all off. It's all y'all and
That's
y'all.
it.
So we don't.
That's
we got
it.
nothing that we can't say anything about pronoun grammatical correctness. Maybe a better way to say it would be conversing with DeShay in ways that are true to who they are is more important than what you think is grammatical correctness, right?
Yes.
Or what you perceive as grammatical correctness based upon a lifetime of speaking that way.
Yes.
Right?
I was like, don't read early, I think it's like Shakespeare or part of like early Shakespeare because its original use was singular. And so in the language, it evolves. And therefore it gets changed and then it changes again. Hi, welcome to language. And why it's important. I felt like there was, my last thing though, I'm telling you all. If and when you slip up, do not, for the love of God, hold on that. Don't sit in the guilt. Don't be like, oh my God, I know you heard, you just said this.
Amy and I have done that, haven't we? We've done that a couple times.
Every once in a while.
Sorry.
It's like, don't do, I was like, there's no need to, because I'm like, if you want to be honest about it, the first thing is I'm like, it's fine. I'm like, I'm not that butthurt. The second part of it is just like, y'all, what it does is it compromises my feelings because then what it is then I have to coddle you. I have to give you love and reaffirm to you like, hey, no, it's okay, it's okay.
Kind of like that fragility.
It's a fragility thing. I'm sorry, I don't want to speak like it in that way. It is one of those things that ends up happening with people that are originally victims. Is that victimizers or those that have caused pain to victims, then when their form of forgiveness or trying to figure out how to be forgiven, it becomes a thing of like, I need you to coddle my feelings because like I'm trying to get there, but like I need you to no.
Okay.
And I was like, no, I'm not gonna coddle you, but I'll just say it's fine.
I want to close by bombarding you with some scripture.
My favorite.
I think you said not to do that today.
Yeah. I don't know. You're pretty good about finding honorable mentions.
I'm gonna bombard you with some scripture, whether you want me to or
I'm
not.
just gonna cry. Y'all gonna see this pain.
Let's see. Where do I want to start? I want to start with Ephesians chapter 2, 8 through 10. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are what God has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life. By grace you have been saved through faith. I didn't read anything there about certain identities or orientations being required. I read about grace, saving us through faith. And my sibling, I perceive great faith in you. How have I seen that? Well, faith bears fruit. And here are the fruits of the Spirit as articulated in Galatians chapter 5, 22 through 26. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Do you have that one? That last one, I don't.
That was a little hard.
Self-control.
I don't know about that one.
You working on that. We're all working on that. We're all working on self-control. You have those love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness. You have those things in as great an abundance as anyone I have ever known. And I do not believe that you would, were it not for your deep faith. And I want to celebrate and acknowledge that in you. And finally, what is it the Lord requires of us?
I knew you were going to one of my favorites. Oh, mortal. But is it?
Yes.
Are we doing justice? Are we walking humbly, or is it to do justice, to love mercy, or to love kindness?
This is the NRSV,
Is that loving kindness?
we have, and there's another good thing about this one, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just back up. Everybody, that's not fair. Maybe not everybody knows this text. A lot of people know this text, but some don't. So let's back up to verse 6. With what shall I come? We're asking God here, right? The prophet Micah is asking God. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before God with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Question mark.
Oh, Jesus.
Verse 8. God has told you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, mortal. What is good?
What is good? And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Shay, thank you for the justice and the kindness that you're working among us and with us here at FCC Granbury. And thank you for your humility, your genuineness, your authenticity, and your willingness to be you and put yourself out there, recognizing that God has gifted you, that God has called you to ministry, that God has created you in the imago Dei, in the image of God. We thank you for bringing all of that we might know God more deeply. I celebrate that with you. And thank you for tonight, for this gift.
I appreciate it. I just appreciate being added to this. Because this is my home.
Yeah.
And if we're going to live together, we best figure out how we're going to work together.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. Home is what we're trying to create here.
Really are.
Yeah.
Really are.
Yeah. Could I ask you to pray? Could you pray us out of our time together?
Absolutely. To our God of many identities, of many names, and of many things, all glory and thanks for tonight. God, we thank you for this moment of brave space, of holy experimentation, of sacredness in living. God, we ask that the word said today not fall on barren land, but produce good fruit, God, for others to enjoy. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be of acceptable and pleasing sight to you. God, be with us on this journey of transformation, of identity, of just being human, God. Be with us and help us to be the best that we can be and the best for each other, God. Call us into community. Call us into difference. Call us into the catastrophe that is our lives. And call us to be one with each other, knowing that we are all different and yet share your divine DNA. We ask that in these days ahead, God, that when we don't know, we rely on your knowledge and wisdom, that when we don't know how, we know you've already created a plan. And God, when we don't know when, we know you've already set a date. So let us live into this season of experimentation, into pure intentionality that asks, what can we do for each other? How we can be another for each other. And it's in your name that we ask these things. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, church. Hope to see you outside 10 o'clock Sunday.
Dress coolly and make sure to wear sunscreen and bring your umbrellas or parasols.
A little warmer Sunday.
It's a little bit.
75 to 80.
And it's
probably
like,
between,
Yeah, and as your melanated, sun-kissed friend, I hold in a lot of that heat, so I can already tell you, just go ahead and make yourself cool. Just do that, not sit with it.
God bless you, church. This is beautiful, though.
My other thing was, I wonder if this is just one person that's doing like the effects pedal.
Who is that, Heath?